Let me set the scene properly, because if I don't, you're going to think I exaggerated later, and I need you to know, I did not exaggerate a single word of this. Midnight. My kitchen. Me holding a spatula like it was a katana, facing down two alphas who share the exact same jawline, the exact same stupid cheekbones, and apparently the exact same complete inability to respect a locked door. Which, side note, was not actually locked, because I keep forgetting the latch sticks, a fact I will be fixing immediately after this story concludes, possibly with a deadbolt, possibly with a moat. Put the spatula down, Saiwo, Hanul said, hands raised like I was a hostage negotiator's worst nightmare instead of his ex-boyfriend, who, and I cannot stress this enough, broke up with me via a voice memo. A voice memo. 43 seconds long. I know because I counted multiple times, in the humiliating weeks after, like a detective building a case against my own heartbreak. I will put the spatula down, I said, very calmly, considering, when someone explains to me why your brother is standing in my kitchen at midnight eating my leftover japchae with his bare hands, like some kind of raccoon who went to business school. Dun, mouth full, chewing with the unbothered energy of a man who has never once in his life considered that he might be in the wrong, shrugged. It was in the fridge. Yes, then that's where food lives. That doesn't make it yours. Fridges are for eating from. That's the whole concept of a fridge. That's not. I refuse to argue kitchen appliance philosophy with you at midnight. Here is the thing you need to understand about my life up to this point. It was quiet. Boring even in the specific and wonderful way that a life is boring after you've survived something loud. For months ago, Hanul and I broke up, or rather, Hanul broke up with me over audio while I was at the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle, listening to my 2-year relationship end between the Raisin Bran and the cornflakes. Very romantic. Very dignified. I have never looked at cornflakes the same way since. Since then, life had been good. Quiet. My scent glands, which used to flare every single time Hanul walked into a room smelling like a candle store had a baby with a thunderstorm, finally calmed down. I stopped flinching at sandalwood cologne on strangers. I started sleeping through the night again. I got a plant. The plant was thriving. I was, by every reasonable metric, doing great. And then, 3 weeks ago, Hanul showed up outside my apartment building holding a coffee I didn't order and an apology I definitely didn't order either. I made a mistake, he said, using that low, gravelly voice that used to make my knees file a formal complaint against my own skeleton. You made several, I said. Which specific mistake are we addressing today? Because we have options. There's the voice memo. There's the fact that you told my mother we were taking a break 3 weeks before you actually broke up with me, so she still texts me asking when you're coming to dinner. There's... Okay, I deserve that. You deserve a list, Hanul. I have it saved in my notes app, it's alphabetized. He looked wounded. Genuinely wounded, in that specific way that used to make me forget my own name. Which, frankly, felt unfair, because a man should not be allowed to look that good while groveling. It ruins the whole point of groveling. I did not expect, however, for his brother to enter the chat. Doyen and I had met exactly twice before this entire debacle began. Once at a stiff family dinner, where he sat at the far end of the table, said maybe 11 words total, and left the impression of a man perpetually doing complicated math in his head. Once at Hanul's birthday, where he arrived, nodded at everyone, and left after 20 minutes without explanation, which at the time I chalked up to him simply being the family's resident weirdo. So imagine my absolute confusion when, the very next morning after Hanul's coffee ambush, Doyen appeared at my office, holding, I want you to sit with this, the exact same brand of coffee, wearing the exact expression of a man who had also, independently, decided to upend my life without consulting me about it first. Your ex is an idiot, Doyen said, sliding the coffee across my desk like we were negotiating a merger. Thank you. Yes, I dated him for 2 years, I'm well aware. I've decided I disagree with how he handled the breakup. Okay? And this concerns me how, exactly? Because I've been thinking about you. Since the birthday party. I would like the record to reflect that I choked. On air. Regular, breathable air, the kind that is supposed to enter a person's lungs without incident, without drama, without becoming a whole thing. You left after 20 minutes, I managed. I left because I couldn't stop staring at you, and it felt inappropriate, considering you were dating my brother at the time. Reader, I need you to appreciate the sheer, unhinged audacity required to say a sentence like that to a person holding a lukewarm oat milk latte at 9 in the morning, in a glass office building, in front of my coworker Minji, who was very obviously eavesdropping and later cornered me at lunch demanding the entire timeline. Saiwoo, I need dates and receipts. I told Doyen to leave. He left. He also left his number, written on a napkin, like we were extras in a 1950s diner scene instead of two grown adults in a corporate break room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and my coworker's fish leftovers from Tuesday. I threw the napkin in the trash with great dignity and purpose. I fished it back out 20 minutes later, purely for research purposes. That's what I told myself. Omega biology is a nightmare. And apparently my body has zero loyalty to my own self-respect, a fact I am still coming to terms with. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, my once peaceful life turned into an absolute circus. Hanul started showing up Mondays and Wednesdays with increasingly theatrical apologies, flowers first, then a handwritten letter that ran 4 pages, then, God help every single one of us, a song, badly performed, off-key in my apartment hallway, while my downstairs neighbor filmed the entire humiliating spectacle for what I can only assume will resurface as blackmail at my funeral. Dun, meanwhile, showed up Tuesdays and Thursdays with something quieter, something worse for my composure. A book he thought I'd like, annotated in the margins with actual thoughtful commentary. A genuine question about my day, followed by the deeply unsettling experience of someone actually listening to my answer, nodding along, asking follow-up questions like my life was a topic worth studying. And then came Friday. Fridays, apparently, without either of them discussing it with the other or with me, became the day they both showed up at once. Which is precisely how I ended up in my current predicament. Spatula raised, Hanul looking apologetic, Dun looking smug and extremely full of stolen japchi, both of them radiating enough competing alpha pheromones that my downstairs neighbor's ancient, half-deaf dog would not stop howling like it was announcing the end times. You too, I said, need to figure out whatever sibling rivalry thing this is without me in the room. This isn't rivalry, Doyen said, calm as ever, setting down my stolen chopsticks. I know exactly what I want. And what, pray tell, is that? He looked at me. Really looked. The kind of look that makes an omega scent glands do something humiliating, involuntary, treasonous. Just you. I don't particularly care what my brother's doing about it. Hanul, who had been quiet for a suspiciously long stretch of this conversation, chose that exact moment to say the sentence that ended my entire drama-free, spatula-optional evening for good. Then I guess we're doing this together. I dropped the spatula. It clattered against the tile with a sound so loud it startled all 3 of us, and somewhere in the building, that dog howled again, like even it knew, this was only the beginning. Let it be known, for the historical record, filed under things I never agreed to, I did not consent to any of this. I want that stated clearly, with witnesses, possibly notarized. Double date. With 2 brothers. Both interested in me. Simultaneously. On purpose, apparently, because they discussed it, without me, like I was a shared Google Calendar event they needed to coordinate around. It started because Doyen, in an act of what he called being reasonable, his exact words, I wrote them down, suggested that instead of both brothers ambushing me separately like a pair of stray cats who'd imprinted on the wrong human, we should all sit down and talk like adults. I should have said no. I should have said, Doyen, adults generally do not request a group dinner with their romantic rival's ex-boyfriend to discuss shared custody of that ex-boyfriend's affections. But my mouth, which has never once consulted my brain before making decisions, said instead, fine. But I'm ordering the most expensive thing on the menu, and I'm not sharing it. Which is how I ended up, that Friday night, at a restaurant Hanul selected specifically for its rooftop view, romantic, he called it, seemingly forgetting that his brother was also present, thereby making the romance a three-person event nobody had RSVP'd to except, apparently, my own increasingly chaotic subconscious. The evening started deceptively normal. Doyen pulled out my chair like a gentleman from a period drama. Hanul immediately pulled out the chair on my other side with the competitive energy of a man participating in an Olympic event. I sat between them, feeling less like a romantic interest and more like a trophy at a very tense, very confusing awards ceremony neither of us remembered nominating me for. So, I said, grabbing the menu like a shield, should we address the elephant in the room, or should we just order appetizers and collectively pretend this is a normal Friday? I vote appetizers, Hanul said, immediately, aggressively. I vote we address it, Doyen said, just as immediately. Of course you do, Hanul muttered, shooting his brother a look I can only describe as fraternal betrayal. Doyen turned to me, ignoring his brother completely, which, I was learning quickly, was his signature move, a kind of surgical dismissal he'd clearly been perfecting his whole life. I meant what I said outside your office. I want to court you properly. You don't have to choose between us right now. I just want a fair chance to be considered. A fair chance, Hanul repeated, scandalized, like his brother had suggested something deeply improper instead of, basic human decency. You want a fair chance to date my ex-boyfriend. In front of me. At dinner. That I planned. You broke up with him over a voice memo, Hanul. In a grocery store. You forfeited seniority rights the moment you did that. Seniority rights? This isn't a corporate promotion, Dun. This is a person's heart. Could have fooled me, given how you've been acting like tenure should still count for something after abandoning the position. I put my entire face in my hands and considered, briefly, faking a medical emergency. The waiter, bless his unknowing soul, chose that precise moment to arrive and ask if we were ready to order, and I have never in my life wanted to marry a total stranger so badly, purely for the escape route. Here is the thing nobody warns you about when you're simultaneously being courted by two alphas. It is exhausting in ways that have nothing to do with romance and everything to do with pure logistics. Bin texts good morning at exactly 7 a.m., like clockwork, with something thoughtful. An article he thought I'd find interesting, once a photograph of a dog that reminded him of me for reasons he steadfastly refuses to explain no matter how many times I ask. Hanul texts at 7:03, always precisely 3 minutes later, like he's been sitting there staring at his phone, waiting to one-up his brother by the smallest possible margin, with something charming and slightly deranged, song lyrics, a joke that lands at maybe 40% funny and 60% concerning. By the time dessert arrived, which, without discussing it with each other, they both ordered for me, resulting in 2 identical bowls of mango sticky rice placed in front of me like a metaphor for my entire chaotic existence right now, I had officially had enough. So, both of you. I set down my spoon with more force than the mango sticky rice deserved. I need the two of you to understand something very clearly. I am not a prize. I am not a group project the two of you are racing to get the best grade on. I have an entire life outside of whatever this is. I have a job, I have opinions, I've been thinking about adopting a cat, I have. What kind of cat? Dun asked, with total sincerity, like this was the single most relevant detail in my entire impassioned speech. That is not the point right now, Do. I just think it's relevant information for future planning purposes. Future planning. There is no future planning happening. This is a breakup recovery dinner that spiraled into something unhinged. Hanul snorted into his water glass, and for one traitorous second, I nearly laughed too, because it was, objectively, an absolutely deranged conversation to be having in public, and the sheer absurdity of it cracked something open in my chest that had been clenched tight for months. But then, and here is where the evening took a turn I genuinely did not see coming, despite everything that had already happened, Din's hand found mine beneath the table. Not grabbing. Just resting there. Steady. Asking a silent question I didn't have an answer prepared for. And on my other side, simultaneously, Hanul's knee pressed lightly against mine. The same silent question, the same nervous energy I remembered from the earliest months of our relationship, before everything got complicated, before voice memos and cereal aisles entered the picture. My scent glands, the absolute, unrepentant traitors that they are, flared. Both of them noticed instantly. Both of them went very, very still in that specific way alphas do when an omega scent shifts and they're trying, with visibly enormous effort, not to make the moment weird. Okay, Doyen said quietly, breaking the silence first. We should probably talk about that. About what? I said, in a voice that came out significantly less steady than I had intended. About the fact, Hanul said slowly, carefully, that you just responded to both of us. At the exact same time. I opened my mouth, fully prepared to deny it with everything I had left. The waiter chose that exact moment to drop a full tray 2 tables over, the crash of glass and ceramic echoing through the restaurant, and in the half-second of collective chaos, both brothers turned to look at each other over my head, exchanging an expression I had never once seen either of them wear before, something unspoken, something that looked suspiciously, terrifyingly, like an agreement being finalized without my involvement. We need to talk, Doyen said. All 3 of us. Somewhere private. And that, dear reader, is how I ended up leaving a restaurant with 2 alphas holding my coat, holding my hands, and quite possibly holding my entire future in their hands too, with absolutely zero idea what talking was about to entail. We ended up back at my apartment, which in hindsight was almost certainly a mistake, because my apartment had already, somehow, without my consent, become neutral territory in this ridiculous 3-way Cold War, and now it was about to become the official site of whatever bizarre conversation 2 grown alpha brothers needed complete privacy to have. I made tea. Not because I wanted to be a gracious host to the 2 people currently detonating my carefully rebuilt life, but because my hands needed something, anything, to do that wasn't wringing themselves into an anxious knot in my lap. So, I said, setting 2 mugs down on the coffee table with more force than the situation strictly required. Talk. Doyen and Hanul exchanged a look. It was, frankly, unsettling how identical their faces became when they did that. Same eyebrows drawing together, same jaw setting, like watching 2 versions of the same problem stare at each other across a room. There's something you should know, Doyen began, choosing his words like a man defusing something explosive. About omega alpha dynamics. Specifically, ones that involve more than one bond. I blinked slowly. I'm sorry, what? Triads, Hanul said, jumping in fast, like he physically could not stand the idea of his brother getting there first. They're rare. Uncommon, historically stigmatized, honestly kind of taboo depending who you ask. But they happen. An omega bonding with 2 alphas at once. Usually alphas who are already close. Families sometimes. It's not common, but it's documented. You're telling me, I said very slowly, feeling the pieces click into place with the horrifying inevitability of a car crash you can see coming but can't stop, that this entire chaotic competitive courtship circus you 2 have been running for 3 weeks, was building toward a triad bond. With 2 brothers. And you're telling me this now, after I already, apparently, responded to both of you under a restaurant table like some scent-drunk lunatic in front of a waiter and at least 4 other tables of strangers. We didn't want to bring it up unless it was actually happening, Doyen said, with maddening calm. It's not something you can force, or fake, or plan for. Your body has to genuinely recognize both of us. As a pair. Together. It either happens or it doesn't, and there's no controlling it. And it just did, Hanul added, his voice quieter now, all the usual bravado drained out of it. At dinner. Didn't it? We both felt it. I wanted, more than anything, to stand up and declare this entire premise insane. I wanted to say that 2 months ago my biggest problem in life was whether to renew my gym membership, and that now, apparently, my own biological instincts had unilaterally decided to bond with an entire pair of brothers without so much as running the decision by the rest of me first, like my endocrine system had formed a rogue committee and cut me out of the vote entirely. But, and I hate this, I genuinely hate admitting this, it made a horrible, undeniable kind of sense. The reason Hanul's increasingly theatrical apologies never fully landed wasn't because they lacked sincerity. It was because some deep, stubborn part of me had already sensed something incomplete about them. And the reason Doyen's quiet, careful, infuriatingly patient courtship never once felt like a betrayal of Hanol, and instead felt oddly right, like a missing puzzle piece I hadn't realized was gone until it slid quietly into place. "I need you both to understand something," I said, my voice shaking despite every effort to keep it level. "I am not doing this to make either of you happy. If this happens, and I am not confirming that it's happening, it happens because I want it. Not because you two have some unresolved sibling competition to settle through me." "Understood," Doyen said, immediately without hesitation. "Completely," Hanul agreed, nodding so vigorously I genuinely worried about his neck. "And if this doesn't work out, if I bond with one of you and not the other, or, frankly, neither of you, you two are not allowed to implode as brothers over it. That is not my responsibility to manage, and I will not be attending family therapy to fix it." They both nodded again, slower this time, the full weight of that finally settling over them. The room went quiet. The specific kind of quiet that has a pulse to it, a held breath. I could smell them both clearly now, Hanul's scent, achingly familiar, warm, like the inside of an old bookstore in early autumn. Dun's, newer but somehow not unfamiliar, cedar and rain, sharp and grounding. And underneath both of them, unmistakably, was me, my own scent rising in response, tangling with theirs in a way I had absolutely no roadmap for, no prior experience to draw from, nothing but raw instinct and mounting panic. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice dropping to its smallest register of the entire night. "This isn't normal. This isn't what's supposed to happen to people. This isn't in any of the books I read as a teenager preparing for adult Omega life, and trust me, I read all of them." Doyen moved first, closing the distance on the couch, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him like a held breath finally released. "It doesn't have to happen tonight. It doesn't have to happen at all, if that's not what you want." "But if you do want it," Hanul said, shifting to sit on my other side, mirroring his brother's position with an eerie symmetry, "we're not going anywhere. Neither of us. That part isn't up for negotiation between us anymore." I sat there, sandwiched between two alphas who had somehow, against every reasonable expectation I'd ever held for my own quiet, boring, plant-owning life, become the two most consistent, most maddening, most inexplicably comforting forces in it over the span of 3 chaotic weeks. My heart was doing something complicated and much too fast. My scent glands were doing something even more complicated and significantly less dignified. "I need time," I said finally, forcing the words out before I lost my nerve completely. "I need to actually think. Without either of you in the room, making my glands behave like they've never encountered a scent before in their entire biological existence." Both of them, to their considerable credit, actually stood to leave without argument. Small mercies, I thought, in a night that had offered precious few. But as they reached my front door, Dun paused, turned back, and delivered the sentence that made every single rational thought remaining in my head evaporate on contact. "Whatever you decide," he said, "even if it's neither of us, I need you to know something first." "What?" I asked, already bracing myself. He glanced at Hanul, some silent permission passing between the brothers, and then said quietly, devastatingly, "The reason his apologies never fully worked wasn't because you didn't love him. It's because your body already knew something he never said out loud. That there were supposed to be two of us all along." The door closed behind them with a soft, final click. I sat alone in my apartment, tea going cold on the table, my entire nervous system staging an open rebellion, staring at the empty space where two alphas had just calmly, devastatingly upended everything I thought I understood about my own life. And underneath the fear, underneath the sheer unmitigated audacity of the entire evening, was something else entirely. Something warm. Something that smelled, unmistakably, impossibly, like home. 3 days. That's what I gave myself to think, and honestly, 3 days was nowhere near enough time to fully process the fact that my own body had apparently decided, without a shred of consultation with my rational brain, that it wanted to bond with two brothers at the exact same time, like some kind of biological group chat I never agreed to be added to. Day 1, I spent in aggressive denial, scrubbing my apartment top to bottom with the fervor of someone trying to physically clean away a memory, as if enough disinfectant could erase the way Doyen's cedar scent still lingered on my couch cushions, tangled hopelessly with Hanul's warm bookstore one, both of them lounging there together like a taunt I hadn't asked for. Day 2, I called my best friend Yuna and told her the entire saga from start to finish, watching her face on video call cycle through disbelief, fascination, and finally a kind of gleeful horror usually reserved for reality television finales. Okay, she said, once I'd finished, wild question, but do they actually get along? Because if you're doing this, and Saiwu, I'm not judging, I would also do this. I need to know if I'm attending one unified Christmas dinner or personally negotiating a hostage situation between courses. They get along now, I said. Weirdly. Since the whole triad revelation dropped on me like a piano. They keep texting me together now. From the same phone, sometimes. Like a small, unsettling committee. Is that unsettling bad, or unsettling hot? I did not dignify that question with an answer, because the honest answer was deeply, humiliatingly the latter, and Yuna's smug little smile through the screen told me she already knew it. Day 3, I woke up to a single text. Not from Hanul alone. Not from Doyen alone. From both of them, sent from the same number, which meant that at some point in the last 72 hours, the two of them had exchanged enough information, enough phone access, enough basic sibling cooperation to be standing in the same room, sharing a single device, coordinating like a tiny, chaotic task force assembled specifically to manage my emotional state. We're outside. No pressure at all. We just wanted you to know, whatever you decide, we already talked, just the two of us. We're not losing each other over this, no matter what happens. You don't have to carry that worry too. I stood at my window and looked down at the street below, where two identical dark heads stood exactly 6 feet apart, hands shoved in their pockets, both wearing the exact same nervous expression, like they'd rehearsed being anxious in perfect, unintentional unison. I want to tell you I had some grand, dignified, cinematic moment of clarity. I did not. What I actually had was my body moving faster than my brain could keep pace with, grabbing my keys, skipping the elevator entirely in favor of the stairs, bursting through the front door in pajama pants and yesterday's hoodie like a woman sprinting toward a fire instead of fleeing one. They both turned the instant the door slammed shut behind me. Neither of them said a word. They simply watched me cross the sidewalk toward them, and I watched myself do it too, somehow, like I'd stepped outside my own body to observe with a mixture of amusement and pure terror whatever was about to happen next. I stopped directly in front of them, close enough to catch both scents at once, cedar and rain tangled with warm bookstore autumn, and for the first time since this entire ridiculous circus began 3 weeks ago, instead of feeling torn cleanly in two opposite directions, I felt something settle. Something click. Like two puzzle pieces finally slotting into a picture whose full shape I hadn't been able to see until this exact moment. This is insane, I said. Completely, Doyen agreed immediately. Historically inadvisable on every conceivable level, Hanul added. If this goes badly, I am blaming both of you by full name, directly to your mother at the next family dinner, in front of everyone. Fair. They said, at the exact same time, in the exact same tone, with the exact same resigned acceptance, and something about that perfect, involuntary synchronicity finally broke the tension I'd been carrying for 3 straight days, cracking it wide open into real, genuine laughter, the kind that catches you off guard and doesn't stop easily once it starts. I reached out and took a hand from each of them. Doyen's steady and warm, like he'd been holding it out patiently the entire 3 days. Hanul's slightly unsteady, trembling just faintly, like some part of him still couldn't quite believe this was actually happening after everything. Okay, I said once I'd caught my breath. New terms. Renegotiated custody arrangement, effective immediately. Nobody shows up unannounced at midnight to eat my leftovers with their bare hands like a feral raccoon. Nobody sends competitive good morning texts 3 minutes apart just to one-up each other for my attention. And if either of you ever makes me choose between you again, even implicitly, even as a joke, I will bond with neither of you, adopt 6 cats, and name every single one of them after minor inconveniences in your lives. Deal, Dun said instantly without a flicker of hesitation. What kind of cats? Hanul asked, entirely serious, and Doyen actually laughed out loud at that. A real, surprised laugh, the kind that catches even the person laughing off guard, like he hadn't expected his own brother to make him laugh in the exact middle of the most important conversation of all three of our lives. Standing there on the sidewalk, holding both their hands, feeling my scent finally settle into something that felt less like chaos and more like coming home after a very long, very confusing trip, I realized this wasn't remotely the ending I'd planned for myself. It wasn't the neat, single alpha, one scent forever fairy tale I'd been quietly expecting since I was old enough to understand what bonding even meant. It was messy, louder. It involved, apparently, two grown alpha men fighting over stolen leftover japchae at midnight, competing morning texts sent 3 minutes apart, and one deeply memorable badly performed hallway song that my downstairs neighbor still brings up unprompted at every possible opportunity. But it was mine. Both of them, somehow, impossibly, were mine. And for the first time in months, maybe the first time ever, that didn't feel like a problem I needed to solve. It felt like exactly, finally, enough.